It all started with a burst of excitement that no one, absolutely no one, expected. DeWanna Bonner, a seasoned star with multiple WNBA championships and a fierce on-court reputation, announced her decision to join the Indiana Fever. Instantly, social media erupted. Commentators, analysts, and even a few ex-players seemed stunned. Why Indiana? Why a team everyone had labeled undesirable, going so far as to call its culture toxic? Skeptics emerged from every corner, arguing that this move defied logic. But according to Bonner herself, those doubters had it all wrong. From her perspective, there was no better place than Indiana to write the next chapter of her storied career. For months, rumors had circulated that the Indiana Fever were haunted by a behind-the-scenes negativity, a vibe so bleak, star players supposedly wanted no part of it. Some pointed the finger at a so-called rough locker room environment, while others pinned the blame on fan behavior, claiming Fever supporters and even Caitlin Clark's admirers weren't exactly the friendliest. The controversy reached a boiling point when former WNBA star Sheryl Swoopes implied that Indiana might be a place players were desperate to escape. Her words echoed across the internet, fueling debates on fan forums, basketball podcasts, and beyond. Yet, as Bonner made clear the moment she signed, that entire storyline was built on a weak foundation. She wasn't about to let a convenient narrative overshadow the truth. Bonner's decision wasn't just a random spin of the wheel, it was deeply calculated. In interviews and press conferences, she laid out multiple reasons for wanting to wear that Fever jersey. The first was close to her heart, literally. She wanted to be nearer to her kids, and Indiana provided that opportunity. But that was only the beginning. What truly intrigued her was the youthful energy of this team, especially the promise of a rising superstar named Caitlin Clark. Despite being a first-year pro, Clark exploded onto the WNBA scene with the kind of fearless shooting, savvy passing, and unstoppable confidence that turns heads in a hurry. Bonner, seasoned as she is, saw something extraordinary brewing and knew she wanted to be part of it. Before Bonner's arrival, certain commentators insisted that Indiana fans and Caitlin Clark supporters were borderline destructive, painting them as overly intense or quick to throw blame when games didn't go the right way. But the second Bonner walked into the Fever organization, she got a taste of the reality. An energized fan base desperate for a deep playoff run, staff and coaches determined to build a winning culture, and young players hungry to prove their worth. Where some saw friction, Bonner saw possibility. She has repeatedly emphasized that she feels the Fever fan base is among the most dedicated in the league. Far from toxic, they're simply passionate. And in a sport that thrives on momentum, you can't ask for a better kind of crowd. Sheryl Swoopes' earlier remarks about the Fever stung many supporters, especially those who've stood by the team through winning streaks and losing seasons alike. Questions floated around. Did those statements hold any real weight? Once Bonner broke her social media silence, it became clear she wasn't afraid to call them out. She openly challenged the idea that players have been avoiding Indiana. If there was any toxicity, she said, it existed in the warped rumor mill spinning tall tales online. And if there was truly a problem, Bonner was determined to fix it from the inside out rather than run away. That kind of bold attitude quickly won over fans who'd grown tired of hearing naysayers tear the team down. Yet the story doesn't hinge on Bonner alone. The Fever's promising core includes not just Caitlin Clark, but also Aaliyah Boston, a dominant paint presence who entered the league with enormous potential, and Kelsey Mitchell, whose lightning-quick scoring and explosive drives often leave defenders in the dust. Then there's Lexi Hull, a name that might not show up in every highlight reel, but her hustle and tenacity can lock up an opposing offense in an instant. To top it off, the team added Natasha Howard, a seasoned champion known for locking down the lane and intimidating some of the league's best scorers. On paper, that lineup is terrifying, but as Bonner wisely points out, building chemistry on paper means nothing if you can't make it click in real games. So what is it about Caitlin Clark that has Bonner, a battle-tested veteran, speaking with such excitement? It's not just Clark's ability to sink deep-range shots like their free throws or her knack for finding teammates in the perfect spot. It's her mindset, her unwavering belief that she can dominate in high-stakes moments. As a rookie, Clark walked onto WNBA hardwood and refused to bow to the so-called hierarchy. She played with the intensity of someone who knew she belonged at the top, not merely lurking on the edges. Bonner has encountered plenty of hyped-up players over the years, but there's something about Clark's relentless drive that sets her apart. And if anyone understands what it takes to win in the clutch, it's Bonner. Her playoff pedigree speaks for itself. Numerous high-pressure showdowns, battles against all-time greats, and a trophy case that tells the tale of how she's thrived when everything's on the line. Now, as she looks at the young, hungry Fever roster, Bonner sees a reflection of something she once experienced herself. That early career hunger to prove everyone else wrong. The notion that nobody wants to play for Indiana ironically gave these players the motivation to band together and form a bond that's becoming stronger by the day. But let's talk about the tension that erupted in last year's playoffs when Bonner and Clark were on opposing sides. Both refused to back down, each trying to carry her team across the finish line. To the outside world, it might have looked like the two were sworn enemies. In reality, it was simply the collision of two fiery competitors who recognized the greatness in one another. When Bonner later reflected on that showdown, she admitted it was a defining moment, one that illustrated just how potent Clark could be if she had the right mentor. Now, instead of trading elbows and trash talk, they're collaborating in practice and strategizing on how to break down the league's toughest defenses. In Bonner's view, Clark hasn't even scratched the surface of her potential. That might sound ridiculous given how quickly Clark put up staggering numbers, but Bonner insists there's more to come. Handling the demands of the WNBA, facing off against bigger, stronger, and more experienced veterans every night, isn't easy. Bonner's role is to make sure Clark learns how to navigate the mental and physical challenges that come with being a star in a league as competitive as this one. The slightest adjustment in reading a defense, the right approach to game day preparation, and the mental toughness to weather the pressure of sold-out crowds, Bonner has lived it all. Now she's determined to pass that knowledge along to Clark, and Clark isn't the only beneficiary of Bonner's guidance. Aaliyah Boston, another rising force, stands to gain immensely from sharing the floor with such a seasoned pro. A well-known maxim in basketball is that bigs need someone who can feed them the ball in the best possible spots, and with a guard like Clark plus a veteran forward like Bonner, Boston might see more high-quality scoring opportunities than ever. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell is poised to elevate her scoring average, given that opponents now have to prioritize shutting down multiple threats at once. The synergy is obvious. If Clark is orchestrating from the perimeter, Boston is commanding respect down low, and Mitchell is slashing or pulling up from mid-range. Who do you guard first? The addition of Natasha Howard is an equally big deal. She and Bonner share multiple accolades and understand the mental grind of postseason basketball. Some are calling them the veteran anchors, and for good reason. The memory of last season's playoff run is still fresh in Fever fans' minds, where the young roster showed flashes of promise but lacked the experience to close out tougher opponents. With Howard and Bonner on board, those final moments in nail-biter games might tilt in Indiana's favor. The intangible value of having leaders who have lifted trophies and endured heartbreak is immeasurable. Critics, however, still lurk in the background. Every time the Fever start gathering positive momentum, someone emerges to remind the basketball world that Indiana's track record isn't exactly star-studded in recent years. People question if the hype around Caitlin Clark will fizzle out once defenses key in on her. They wonder if DeWanna Bonner's best days are behind her, or if the coaching staff can effectively use so many playmakers at once. On top of that, a portion of the online chatter insists that Indiana's fan base is too volatile to sustain a stable environment. Bonner's response? Watch us. She believes the negativity only fuels the Fever's fire, motivating them to prove each skeptic wrong. Cheryl Swoops, who once hinted that the Fever's culture was an issue, has become something of an invisible antagonist in this story. Fans joke about how she's gone missing or quiet ever since Bonner's choice rocked the league. To the Fever faithful, Swoops' words lit a spark under the team, and DeWanna Bonner made sure to turn that spark into a roaring blaze. With each practice session and media interview, Bonner reiterates that she chose Indiana for very real reasons. A chance to win, a supportive fan base, and a lineup stacked with future stars. The opinions of doubters and critics might echo on Twitter and sports talk shows, but the Fever's new leader refuses to waste time arguing. She'd rather let wins on the court do the talking. But there's another layer to this saga that can't be overlooked. The Fever's front office worked meticulously in the offseason, targeting players who not only fit well on the court, but also mesh off it. Building a winning team isn't just about collecting talent. You need personalities that click, veterans willing to mentor, and younger players who can adapt. From all accounts, that's exactly what's happening in Indiana. While the free agency moves were unfolding, fans braced themselves for disappointment, certain that no marquee names would come. Then came Howard. Then came Bonner. Suddenly, the Fever's fortunes were looking up in a way that no one anticipated. Transitioning from a middling or even bottom-tier squad to a genuine contender is never a simple task. Plenty of WNBA teams have tried to load up on stars, only to watch everything collapse under the weight of clashing egos and jumbled game plans. That's why Bonner's emphasis on fitting in the puzzle is so crucial. She recognizes that this roster has multiple alpha personalities. Clark doesn't back down from anyone. Mitchell has carried the scoring burden for years, and Boston has emerged as an undeniable force. Balancing those roles means setting aside personal accolades to pursue a bigger objective, a championship run. Yet, for all the talk of super teams forming in major markets, the concept of a championship coming out of Indiana might sound like fantasy to some. But to supporters who fill the arena night after night, it feels like destiny. If Bonner and Howard can offer the right leadership, if Clark can keep evolving, if Boston dominates the paint, and if Mitchell continues dropping 20 points in her sleep, the Fever could be unstoppable. That's a mountain of ifs, one of course, but it's more substance than the team has had in years. And in a league where one or two key acquisitions can transform a franchise, there's a real belief that Indiana's moment is finally here. The question of Caitlin Clark's sophomore surge looms large. Historically, some rookies who had brilliant first seasons hit a slump when defenses adjust. But Bonner dismisses the idea of a sophomore slump, insisting Clark is too tenacious to be held down by typical strategies. Teams might try to double-team her or force her to shoot from awkward spots, but with Bonner, Boston, and Mitchell on deck, good luck to anyone who tries. The synergy of multiple stars who genuinely like each other and want to see one another thrive could be the Fever's secret weapon. Far too often, loaded rosters crumble under internal friction, but from every interview out of Indiana, the players sound more like a family than a collection of random talents. Consider also the coaching staff, who have welcomed Bonner with open arms. Coaches are well aware that time is precious in a league with a shorter season. A quick start can set the tone, while stumbling out of the gate can break a team's confidence. Bonner's presence in training camp is expected to turbocharge the learning curve. She'll push younger teammates, hold them accountable, and share tips that only a playoff-tested champion can offer. Meanwhile, her honest, outspoken nature means she won't tiptoe around issues. If something needs fixing, she'll say so, setting a standard for straightforward communication that coaches often dream of. But that wasn't the whole story behind her arrival. Another underlying factor is the unique bond she's building with the fan community. Despite the negative labels tossed around, Bonner admits she's excited by the sheer devotion of Fever supporters. She's described them as hungry, the kind of crowd that'll cheer their team on even when the odds look grim. That unwavering loyalty can become an intangible home court advantage, especially in tight playoff series. Bonner has played in arenas where the energy was electric, and she says Indiana's fans have the potential to match, if not surpass, anything she's seen. The notion that fans are toxic only amuses her now, because she's convinced people misconstrued passion for hostility. And what about Cheryl Swoops' jabs? Now that Bonner has publicly called them out, many are waiting to see if Swoops will clarify her position. Was it all simply speculation on her part? Or did she genuinely believe the Fever environment was that bad? For Bonner, it doesn't really matter. She's here, she's ready, and she's committed to helping prove once and for all that Indiana isn't a dumping ground or a place to avoid. Instead, she aims to show it's a hidden gem that can blossom into a perennial contender with the right mix of leadership and grit. Behind closed doors, there's talk of specific goals the Fever want to accomplish this season. Bonner has hinted they're setting the bar high. She wants Indiana to become a place where opposing teams walk in with trembling confidence, remembering that the Fever aren't the same pushovers they may have been just a couple of seasons ago. The collective mantra, whispered among players, is something along the lines of, "They won't see us coming." But with all the hype swirling around Bonner's arrival, it might be impossible to stay under the radar for very long. Even so, the biggest changes often happen quietly, away from the public eye. Bonner and Howard arrive hours before official practice to watch film with Boston and Clark, identifying weak spots and brainstorming how to exploit them. Mitchell has been seen shooting early in the morning, sometimes with Clark by her side, discussing where they can each score in transition. Lexi Hull, never one to seek the spotlight, focuses on defensive drills, determined to become a spark who can lock down bigger forwards. Piece by piece, the puzzle is coming together. Opponents across the WNBA are starting to voice concerns. There's buzz that Indiana might catch certain powerhouse teams off guard, especially if they're foolish enough to underestimate a roster that's vastly improved. Veterans around the league who once dismissed the Fever as a non-threat are quietly studying new game film, realizing that the presence of multiple scorers complicates even the best defensive schemes. And that's exactly what Bonner wants: to disrupt conventional wisdom and show that a strong team-first approach can topple squads featuring a couple of star players surrounded by weaker supporting casts. Additionally, Bonner's short but powerful statements to the media about her reasons for signing in Indiana have gone viral, racking up thousands of likes and shares. People are intrigued by her unwavering confidence in a team that finished near the bottom of the standings not so long ago. Most veterans in her position would chase a guaranteed ring with an already stacked lineup. But Bonner chose to bet on a squad that's hungry to rewrite the script, and that gamble might pay off big time. No matter how high the expectations, Bonner knows it will take time to gel. Early season battles could be messy as players figure out each other's tendencies under real game pressure. One-off night for Clark could mean the difference between a narrow victory and a disheartening loss. One lapse in communication on defense might lead to an upset that triggers a wave of fresh doubt. But that's the nature of the WNBA's competitive landscape. Nothing is given, everything is earned. And if this Fever team can weather those initial storms, their upside is enormous. Bonner has made it clear that she plans to introduce a championship mindset in Indiana. That isn't just a catchy phrase, it's a day-to-day approach, from the way players handle practice intensity to how they recover after a tough loss. She wants a culture where no one settles for mediocrity or celebrates moral victories. If you have a bad game, you watch the film, you fix the mistakes, and you come back stronger. If you win by 20, you still scrutinize every defensive breakdown to make sure it doesn't happen again. That might sound intense, but it's how championship teams are forged. Meanwhile, the fans are already buying in. Ticket sales have jumped, and local sports radio shows are buzzing with fresh optimism. Younger fans who once gravitated toward bigger-name franchises are suddenly excited about repping the Fever. The toxic label that once hovered like a dark cloud has been vaporized by Bonner's mere presence and honest statements. Even the casual basketball fan who typically only tunes in during the WNBA finals has started to hear that something special is happening in Indiana. And the more talk there is, the more everyone wants to see whether the Fever can walk the walk. Still, there's an undeniable sense of pressure tied to Bonner's arrival. She's aware that her presence sparks the highest expectations the franchise has seen in years. Failure to meet those might create a wave of frustration, especially among fans who've been let down before. But Bonner embraces that risk, framing it as motivation rather than a burden. She's remarked that if a team has no pressure, that usually means it has no real shot at the title. She'd rather be in the spotlight with onlookers expecting greatness than be stuck in mediocrity where nobody cares if the team succeeds or not. Clark, for her part, seems to be thriving on the newfound energy. Gone are the days when she was merely an exciting rookie story. Now she's looking like a central figure in a grand plan to transform Indiana's fortunes. Her second-year leap could be monumental, especially if Bonner and Howard help her hone the mental side of the game. Recognizing defensive shifts in real time, adjusting to complex traps, and discovering how to exploit double teams with quick decisions. If any young player is prepared for that next step, it's Clark, who thrives on proving people wrong. Skeptics might still argue that a single off-season signing won't solve all of Indiana's problems. They'll note that synergy takes longer than a few training camp sessions to develop, and that the Eastern Conference features well-established teams not easily toppled. True enough, no one expects the Fever to cruise through the season without turbulence. But the difference now is they have the leadership, talent, and collective determination to endure those rough patches. In the past, a 4-game losing streak might have derailed the team's morale. This year, they'll have Bonner reminding them that even championship squads go through slumps. It's how you respond that matters. As opening day looms, the WNBA world watches with heightened curiosity. Will Bonner's arrival truly transform Indiana into a playoff powerhouse? Or will the hype fade after a few early losses? For Fever fans, there's an almost electric anticipation, fueled by the idea that this could be the season that rewrites the franchise narrative entirely. And for Bonner herself, there's an undeniable sense of destiny, as though she stepped onto the perfect stage at the perfect moment. She's stated repeatedly that her mission isn't just to collect stats, it's to leave a legacy, one that cements the Fever as a respected contender, not a footnote in league discussions. Looking at the rest of the league, rival teams aren't exactly trembling, but they're paying attention. Some coaches have quietly admitted that the Fever could surprise everyone in the latter half of the season once the chemistry clicks. Others remain unconvinced, pointing out that youth can be a double-edged sword, explosive on its best nights, inconsistent on its worst. Ultimately, the only way to settle these debates is through the kind of basketball that raises goosebumps, that makes fans jump out of their seats, and that turns players into legends. If there's one final takeaway from Bonner's arrival, it's that the conversation surrounding the Indiana Fever has shifted in a way few would have predicted. The old storyline, that the team was stuck in a rut and that no prominent player wanted to set foot in that locker room, has been shattered. Replacing it is a buzz of excitement, an undercurrent of belief that maybe, just maybe, this is the start of a new era. And in the WNBA, where passion runs deep and every game can flip a team's fortune, a fresh era is exactly what fans have been yearning for. Those who continue to cry toxic are now in the minority, overshadowed by the hundreds of positive comments praising Bonner's fearlessness and the Fever's potential. For the Indiana faithful, it feels vindicating. After all, they've been showing up for years, waiting for the moment when their beloved team would command real respect. If the Fever can channel that collective determination into on-court results, then watch out. This squad could morph into one of the fiercest challenges the league has ever witnessed. So, what comes next? That's the question echoing through every training drill, every strategy session, every local news special about the upcoming season. The conclusion is still unwritten, but the excitement is real. Perhaps the biggest thing we're witnessing isn't just a team acquiring a big-name player, but an organization discovering its own identity, one built on resilience, camaraderie, and a relentless desire to win. That's a recipe for high-stakes basketball, and it's exactly what makes fans crave more. At the end of the day, DeWanna Bonner's move to Indiana is about more than a single transaction. It's about redemption for a franchise many had already dismissed. It's about rewriting a flawed narrative and silencing those who would paint the entire fan base with a negative brush. Most of all, it's about forging a path to success on the shoulders of athletes, both young and old, who share a vision of greatness. Whether that vision translates into immediate championships or a longer journey filled with ups and downs, it has already reignited the spark that Fever fans have been longing for. Now, the spotlight shines bright on Indiana. In every post-game interview, in every viral highlight reel, the recurring theme will be transformation. And if Bonner, Clark, Boston, Mitchell, and Howard can align their talents to bring that transformation to life, we might look back on this moment as the turning point that launched the Fever from underrated contenders to unstoppable forces. With every practice and every game, they're working toward a destiny that nobody believed could exist in Indiana. Nobody, that is, except the ones who dared to see potential where others saw only problems. At this point, there's only one thing left to do. Watch. Watch how these players develop. Watch how the critics respond when the Fever start collecting wins, and watch how quickly a handful of veterans and rising stars can galvanize an entire franchise. Because if DeWanna Bonner has anything to say about it, the Indiana Fever are about to set the WNBA on fire. And when the dust settles, there won't be any room left for that outdated myth that nobody wants to play in Indiana. Bonner has exposed the truth. The Fever have something special, and that something is about to reshape the league's hierarchy in a way no one saw coming. Conclusion. In the end, maybe this is about more than changing a franchise's fortunes. It's about challenging the assumptions people hold on to for far too long. By choosing the Indiana Fever, DeWanna Bonner ignited a chain reaction that shatters stale narratives and ushers in a wave of possibility. The next few months could be a jaw-dropping revelation, exposing the real power of a team hungry for redemption. If the Indiana Fever manage to surpass the lofty expectations now set upon them, their transformation will be one of the greatest stories the WNBA has seen in years. And if you think this is all hype, just wait. The only thing more shocking than Bonner's bold move might be what happens when this team finally realizes just how unstoppable it can become. Think it's all talk? Let the season begin and we'll find out. In the meantime, share your thoughts. Are you convinced this Fever team could be destined for glory? Or do you still doubt they can shake off the old criticisms? Drop a comment, keep the conversation going, and be sure to follow along, because the story of DeWanna Bonner, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, Natasha Howard, and the revamped Indiana Fever has only just begun. One thing's certain, you won't want to miss what comes next.